Scientist for the Smart Cities Council. Welcome to our session. We have a very distinguished panel here today, and we'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in just a moment. But we have Tammy Barron from SouthernLINC Wireless, starting here. Mike Bell, President and CEO of Silver Spring Networks. Mike Zito, the General Manager of AT&T Smart Cities. And Kiva Allgood from Qualcomm, who is the President for Business Development in the Smart Cities and Industrial IoT area. So we'd like to begin with your perspective and thinking on smart cities. What's your current role? How are you engaged with smart cities? Why is this a key business area? Great, and we've just been joined by Lonnie Ingram, who is the VP for Smart Communities at Verizon. So welcome, everybody, and we'll start with you, Tammy, and kind of work our way down the panel. If each of you could respond to this. So kind of how does your current role bring you into the smart cities domain?
Thank you, Stuart. Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you with the panel that we have today. I've actually only been in the wireless business about a year and a half. SouthernLINC actually is the fiber and wireless subsidiary of Southern Company. Southern Company is the second largest gas and electric utility in the country. So SouthernLINC exists to serve the master of the mothership, the Southern Company. So that's really our interest in smart cities. It's really about the electric and gas infrastructure in the areas that we serve. So I've been in this role as CEO and president of SouthernLINC for about a year and a half, but I come from the operations side of our business. So these guys know a whole lot more about the wireless industry than I will ever know. But as it relates to the electric operations of Southern Company, that's really where my expertise, 31 years, has existed. And I know I don't look that old. So y'all should gasp at that. So that's my interest in where we play as SouthernLINC in a smart cities environment. It's from an infrastructure play.
Great. Mike.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I took over as CEO of Silver Spring Networks about a year ago, and traditionally we have been providing smart grid technology to the utilities industry. And to kind of give you all a reference, we have about 35% market share in the US for what we call smart metering and distribution automation, which is kind of smart grid connectivity. It turns out that when you put up a wireless canopy like we put up to service the utilities, that there are a lot of cities underneath that wireless canopy that you can do other things with. So we're finding that utilities no longer just think about things such as metering and distribution automation. They're also starting to think about how they can partner with the cities and maybe other smaller utilities and municipalities under their wireless canopy to provide more services. So we're actually, we have quite a big business going right now in streetlights. That's sort of a near adjacency. And we're finding a lot of other use cases where cities want to do environmental monitoring, parking, other sorts of more traditional IoT sort of things. And we're seeing that the utilities and the cities are starting to form partnerships to provide those services on what traditionally was thought of as a utility-only sort of network.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm Mike Zito, General Manager of AT&T Smart Cities Business. We are a business unit inside of IoT. We actually, we're in a new business for AT&T, a separate vertical inside of IoT. We announced the business formation last year at CTIA. Have made a lot of progress in the first year, leveraging the expertise that we have around IoT and the 10 years in M2M, where we've been serving not only enterprise businesses, but cities and municipalities as well. We announced a Smart Cities framework last January at CES, and some spotlight cities. And really the goal of what we're trying to do from an AT&T perspective is to help cities think holistically and strategically around creating a smarter city. Obviously, a secure and scalable network and connectivity, different types of connectivity that's all represented here is very important. And we feel that the carrier ecosystem has the opportunity to really lead when it comes to helping cities develop strategies that ultimately make them smarter and provide benefits to not only the city but to the citizens as well.
Great, thank you. Kiva.
Hi, good afternoon. Kiva Allgood with Qualcomm Intelligent Solutions. I actually think I have the best job at Qualcomm because I get the pleasure of actually working across all of our different business groups. So we really think about the smart city as the future foundation. So if you think about the transformation that we've seen in a handset, our goal and hope is to start to see that same type of transformation in city infrastructure. So really inspiring cities, municipalities, partners to think about how they can do more with less in a way. So if you think about a light post, it no longer just sheds lights. It also does all the things that were just mentioned. So our goal really is to help people think a little bit differently, as well as think about it in a standardized and interoperable way, because the benefit comes from the sharing of the community information, and only with that sharing of the data do you actually start to see the improvements. So I like working with everybody on this.
Great, thanks. Lonnie.
Thank you. And I would agree, it's actually great to be on this panel because we do all work together very closely. So our role here in Verizon is, my role is responsible for all of our smart communities and venues activities. And this includes not just the cities, but also any universities or airports, sports and entertainment activities. That's why we really call it smart communities, because it's a little bit more than just a municipality activity. In addition to that, we also have the ThinkSpace platform, which supports solutions all across IoT, as well as our telematics activities and consumer small medium business. For us, really the key is to be able to figure out that sweet spot of how technology can really help enable communities to thrive, provide more environmental solutions, economic benefits, and most importantly, touching the citizen, the student, the passenger, and making their lives better through the use of technologies.
Great. Thank you all. So the next few questions are just for anybody who wants to chime in. With Smart Cities Council, we work with some of the world's leading smart city solution providers, and they're trying to deliver these services all over the world. And we hear this challenge constantly, that there's so much data, it's siloed, it's hard to access, and it's hard to make it intuitive, easy to visualize, easy to act on. And so, how can we be sure that all this massive data, all this big data actually gets used, that it's relevant, that it's usable? How are you thinking about that?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, keep
Yeah.
it off.
I think, well, from a Qualcomm perspective, obviously, we have a full portfolio that connects things. So we get data to the cloud or to an edge device. But if you think about even the work that was done in LA, for example, obviously traffic. Anybody been stuck in LA traffic? A hand here or there. One of the big issues is actually film production. But believe it or not, you have to put a permit in for film production at least a month to two in advance. That information is published. Does that information make it into Waze or Google Maps? No. But if it did, would it reduce the congestion that you actually see? So in an effort to take publicly available information, publish that in a open portal, then you're also starting to see innovation around that and integration around that actually impacts the people who live there. So I think it's super important to really think about how can you use the information that comes off of your current systems as well as your cellular network to improve the environment that the people live in. And a lot of times that's just connecting the dots. It's not necessarily a algorithm or supercomputer. It literally is, hey, wait a minute, film production, these 5 streets are closed for the next 4 weeks. Perhaps we should publish that in a way that people can actively use it. So we're starting to see that type of transformation happen as you start to see big data emerge and you start to see community and open data programs evolve in all the different cities.
Yeah. Kiva made a really good point too around interoperability, right? And you've used that word twice now, and I think that's going to be the key theme: interoperability of systems and platforms. And then how do you take that data, to Kiva's point, add sensor data, location data, and then create an intuitive and interactive user interface that would engage citizens, right? And a lot of the work that Lonnie and I are doing is around citizen engagement, and how do you use that open data to really be able to engage citizens and get them in the flow of the city activities, right? And help make their lives easier.
And just to tag on to that, it's exactly right. It's about the citizen. And in many cases, what's great about working in smart communities or smart cities is it could be a from the city for the city model. no one really understands the problems of a particular community better than the people who are in that community. So a lot of what we try and do, really everyone on this panel, is to enable the people who really do understand the problem to help solve their problem. And so that's a big part of what we do as well.
Great, so those problems. So what are you seeing? Can you give the audience a really vivid use case? There's so much hype about IoT, smart cities. Can you give us a really vivid case of a pain point that you're helping to solve for a city?
I like pointing the finger. It's interesting. For us, we are really focused on ensuring that the foundation of a smart community exists. And by that I mean, if you don't have electricity, then you're not plugging in a mobile device and getting a charge, right? How many of you have lived through major storms for several days and what that does? So we're using data on the electric grid through our wireless, highly secure, highly reliable. It's a little bit of a different niche play to ensure that the electric grid operations sustain everything else in the telecom world that happens. I've seen in the 30 years I've been here this convergence of OT and wireless telecom into the electric and gas operations in a huge way. It's almost, you can't do one without the other. So it's this cycle of wireless enabling the electric infrastructure to effectively, efficiently monitor and control. We're not just monitoring, we're controlling the grid. I could sit here and punch a button and open a switch in Atlanta, Georgia if I wanted to. In a highly secure way is the real trick. So our network is not a mass play. We don't want people streaming YouTube on our network. You don't want that because the electric grid, and very much I'm assuming what Mike does, is a different wireless network to ensure that we have secure electric supply in this country. The other thing we're doing, and I think in a big way that we'll say is evolving quickly, is around sustainability and the whole environmental footprint reduction from central plant generation. We control solar, wind, limitedly in the southeast, solar in a bigger way, distributed generation microgrids for community microgrid enabling electric supply. That's how we're using the wireless network in a mission-critical, highly reliable, highly secure fashion to really reduce the footprint from an environmental perspective. It's probably the single biggest way, I'd tell you, that we at Southern are focusing on a use case.
And everybody likes to talk about the kind of sexy things, there are 12 parking spaces on Fifth Avenue and all this stuff. I'd say a couple interesting things. I think there's so much value in things that just fly under the radar. So this week, a pretty big storm hit Florida, and FPL, one of our biggest customers, was able to get the lights back on literally overnight, and they credited the smart grid with being able to do that. And it's not just about being able to read the meters, it's about taking all that data coming off the meters and figuring out what to do with it. And I think that's a common problem that most of our customers, know they got to get into big data because it's the buzzword, but understanding how to not just get reams of data, but important data, and then how to act upon that data is something they're really looking for a lot of help with. And so Florida's a great example. We have another customer in Oklahoma Gas and Electric, that's actually been able to use something called demand response, where it gets hot, you turn the thermostat up a degree. They have said because of that, they've been able to avoid building another power plant. So it's not just hypothetical, and it's not just easier to park. I mean, it's saving, belching tons of emissions into the atmosphere every year. So it's making it this kind of IoT thing that we talk about, and smart city thing, it's making a huge difference that doesn't always get the publicity that the kind of, fun stuff gets.
Yeah, great examples.
This example hit Georgia. 100,000 customers were out. In less than 18 hours, everyone was restored using data, using the wireless network with automation and SCADA control very effectively. We actually have 40 megawatts of demand response in the southeast. That's a big power plant that we no longer are building similarly to OG&E.
Yeah, and some specific examples as well around transportation, right? And so, the City of Atlanta is doing a great job putting together a multimodal transportation strategy, right? And really, I think are going to lead when it comes to using smart technologies to drive that, looking at decreasing congestion, right? Efficient solutions and movement for pedestrian and for bikes. City of Chicago, we're working with them to really focus on using that open data that Kiva was talking about and exposing it so that you can help people move more efficiently from point A to point B, from the airport to the city, and help them choose which mode to take that'll be more effective. And then in one major county that's populated with roughly 30 cities, we're actually using lighting and cameras, small cells and Wi-Fi to create safer and more sustainable solutions for housing complexes, right? Which will not only provide sustainability benefits and decrease cost for the city, provide a safer environment for the underserved communities that need that, and then at the same time, allow them to have access to Wi-Fi services that they may not have the ability to get access to, which will then help with education and bridging some of the divide there. So those are some specific examples that we're working with and doing that within the AT&T Smart Cities framework, throughout the U.S. right now.
Great, great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one problem statement we get is just detection. So we have a big deployment that we've just done at a major league ballpark, and the problem statement wasn't, hey, Qualcomm, Kiva, and we look at your cellular roadmap or your technical roadmap. The problem statement was, we hold big venue events. They now make more money from venues than they did like activities, the Billy Joel concert or a monster truck rally, but they can't charge for those specific events because they only get a bill at the end of the month. And believe it or not, the monster truck guys use a lot more water because they're spraying it down, but they can't. They don't understand if they're making an ROI on those venues and those events and those activities. So the ask was, can you get me high frequency information from the meter without having to tear it up? And the answer is yes. So we were able to take analog signals, create digital signals off of those using both a wireless, an Ethernet, and a cellular network throughout the entire stadium and give them exactly what they needed. So they had the actual platform in place for almost 2 years, but they weren't able to use it because it was basically just telling them what the bill was going to say at the end of the month. And that problem statement applies to any type of multi-dwelling unit. So if you just think about the scalability of that, we're not ripping things out. We're just connecting things that aren't necessarily connected today, and we're doing it in a much more informed and a highly intelligent way. And that means you've got to have maybe a little more compute capability on the edge as well, so not everything's going to the cloud, but it makes it impactful. So in that instance, they actually were having the All-Star game, and typically a building has a schedule. Air conditioning is on at this time, off at this time. It usually gets set. Well, the air conditioning was scheduled to go off 2 hours before the game was about to start. And had they not just implemented the solution that we were working with, the air conditioning wouldn't have been available during the game because it was a water chill system. So the maintenance guy got an alert on his phone, and they went down there and they ensured the air conditioning stayed on. But that real-time actionability only came from collecting the information in a real-time fashion. And so that to us is really a great illustration. Again, number one statement is detection, whether that's an accident or alert. It gets defined by the vertical, but I think the underlying opportunity for the people in this room is figuring out how do you create that action, how do you create that opportunity out of the information.
Great.
And I agree with what everyone was saying, the infrastructure, the safety and security, the data analytics, these are all really important things to be able to help solve for real world problems. The only other thing maybe I'd add to this is Internet of Things sometimes can become very mechanical. And one of the things that I hear over and over again is the need to humanize the Internet of Things. And I think Smart Communities really has that ability to humanize this very technical field. And that's something that we're really focused on, is helping to drive conversations between the government and the citizen, between the stadium owner and the fans, with fan experience activities, between the airport owners and the passengers, driving those positive conversations, sharing the data in a useful way, creating dialogue. These are things that are incredibly important, and things that I think we're helping to solve for as well.
Great. So how do we promote this kind of collaboration that several of you have already referred to between power utilities, telecommunications utilities, cities, even citizen stakeholder groups? It gets very complex. How do you build trust? How do you build a successful long-term operating partnership?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we really need each other, right?
Yeah.
So, we're all sitting here. We've all got communication platforms, right? That's one of the common denominators of us being up here, right? We serve consumers, right? In one way, shape, or form. It's truly an ecosystem play, So we will not be able to drive adoption and then drive the benefits for the country unless we all work together to do that. And the telecommunications industry, I think, in the ecosystem, and frankly, what CTIA is all about is that type of collaboration, right? And I think Glenn mentioned it this morning, and I thought it made a lot of sense, especially coming into the panel here. That competitiveness will drive innovation, right? And then us working together will drive the adoption based on the competitiveness and the innovation. So I think there's a great opportunity for us. And the electric utilities, frankly, they play as key a role as the city does, because you own a lot of that infrastructure, right? I mean, Georgia Power owns 3/4 of the light poles, and we'll be deploying the lighting, and so they have to work in conjunction with the city, right? And then the other utilities, whether it be water, there's a lot of value that will be driven, from solutions and that get deployed by those utilities.
Kiva and Mike and I were just talking about this before we got on stage. We've known each other for a while. It's actually it's kind of a tight group of people who've been involved in this space for, the time that it's been around, which is not very long. And there's a certain passion that I think everybody in this area, from the utility companies to the municipalities, citizen engagement activities, and then, enterprises and telcos like ourselves have around improving the state of the world. And there's something very sincere about, I think, everyone who's in this space. And it permeates. It allows us to be able to challenge each other, at the same time come together for things like standards and smart regulation, ability to create a holistic way for us to actually start delivering some of these solutions. We have to come together to make that happen. And yet we'll still challenge each other, which is good.
We've got the greatest jobs in the world. We're sitting at the intersection of technology and politics with the ability to drive, real tangible benefits for citizens, right? And for our neighbors and for the people that we all serve, right, as companies. So I think it's one of the greatest jobs that you could have.
Yeah, I think that humanistic element of it, if you just think about a city, on average, they use 30% of their budget to clean water and then serve them gas, water, and electric. So even if you just focus on those elements, one of the projects we're the most proud of is actually helping Saipan go from 2 hours of water a day to 4 hours of water a day. And they did it by understanding where the loss was. What does that allow you to do? That allows you to take a shower. That allows you to cook a meal. That allows you to go to the bathroom. All things sometimes we take for granted. So there's that human element. But all of those projects do require subject matter experts. We're not a water expert. So we had to bring in a partner who was a water expert. And that means you have to collaborate in a new way. And every project that we've executed across the globe has been at the cornerstone of that is partnership. Finding people who are really good at what they do and figuring out what the problem statement is, where that's connecting the unconnected, providing internet access for people who don't have it, like the project we're doing in New York. The problem statement is always a humanistic one. It's not a technical one. And so coming to the table with a collaboration and a group of people that can help solve that, not technical problem, but real world problem, is super exciting, and it's a lot of fun. So most of the projects that we've worked on, there isn't a technical problem to be solved. It's just getting the right people together to help the city figure out what they really need to do.
I think, though, one thing we could all probably agree on is that open standards are key to driving this forward, and that actually
100%.
really helps with innovation. I mean, the graveyard of wireless technologies is littered with dead bodies of people who did proprietary stuff and thought they were smarter. They put out a flag and created some sort of fake consortium. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're part of a standard. We also use cellular quite a bit. I mean, I don't think any one solution is going to be the answer to this. But in order for us to all work together, there has to be a documented way that people can go figure out how to make all this stuff work. And open standards, I think, is the way to do that. I mean, without a doubt.
For sure.
So NIST has embarked on a very ambitious effort to create an open standard for smart cities. And they've recognized that we're a little early in that process that there are multiple standards for various pieces of the smart city space. So their first step is kind of cataloging, trying to harmonize a lot of those emerging standards and figure out the right level of depth to create a current standard for smart cities and let that evolve. Because they're trying to avoid stifling creativity by saying, here's the standard now, when there's a legitimate sort of dialogue about which direction the industry should go.
I think you have to set a bar, though. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people rolling out things that you can't even upgrade the firmware on the end user device.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
who's crazy enough to deploy something where you can't flash the firmware if a security vulnerability is found, right? I mean,
Right.
I think that part of what we as an industry have to do is kind of really get out there and say, this is what we think the minimum level of acceptability is for something
Right.
that
Right.
is going to be good enough to survive a period of time.
Exactly. So my question was really around what would you tell NIST to run this effort effectively so it doesn't stifle some interesting directions the industry is going in, but then gets us the standardization that we do want to move quickly.
So I think one of the things that's interesting, and it's a really great project that they're doing, and there's also other efforts that have been happening, quite a bit around this area. The ones that I think are the most interesting are the ones that kind of mirrored themselves off of the original internet protocol. Because if you think about the way that the internet came together, it was a lot of very smart engineering-oriented individuals who came together through a series of white papers that were shared on a not regulated or pushed-down approach, but a very collaborative approach. And people just came together to say, you know what, we're going to use a period versus a comma, or we're going to use www in the beginning. And that's how the standards kind of evolved. Now, IoT and smart communities is that times a much larger factor in some ways, because there are so many players already involved, and it's growing in the direction that it is. But I still think that spirit of collaboration and just coming together and making common decisions, thinking about the big picture, and working together on the standards, coming to forums like this, having dialogues, meeting with one another again, working on protocol efforts. These are all the things that I think make a big difference in the standard space.
Great. So if we think about the fundamental infrastructure of IoT, 5G is going to play a role, different kinds of mesh networks. How do you see all these different kinds of networks actually talking to each other effectively? Which networks do we need to build rapidly? What's the right infrastructure approach for IoT?
So we're just now deploying our 4G LTE network. Y'all are going to laugh. We currently are an Iden Motorola proprietary network in the Southeast. So within 3 years, or you'll never see me again, we will have our new LTE deployment. So the first question I'm asked by folks that many of these guys know is, so we're just now investing significant capital for this infrastructure, and here you're telling me we got to have a 5G overlay, right? So I'm not sure what that looks like for us yet, other than we have an infrastructure in place that should be able to capitalize that network, the 5G kind of world. But for SouthernLINC, we're very focused on serving the electric and gas infrastructure. It's not a mass play to the mass market. And I can't emphasize enough that you have got to have wireless networks that are secure and highly reliable. It's a very different, and one other nuance. We serve roughly 4.5 million customers in the Southeast, another 4 million spread throughout the country. It is critical, not that you just cover population base. We cover 95% of the dirt, including a swamp in South Georgia, to be able to control IoT. Yeah. It's different than it is humanistic. I agree with you, but it's also about coverage to access the sensors and the monitors and the control devices. So it's a little different structure than we typically have seen from my experience in the wireless world. You got to think of it broader, and you got to think of it even in an additional level of security and reliability beyond what anybody else is seeing. I'll give you a quick example. Every cell tower that we're deploying, and remember, I am the power company as well as a wireless company. We are deploying obviously battery. We're also deploying either fuel cell or where we have existing diesel generation, up to 5 to 8 days of backup power supply for every cell site in the Southeast. And I'm the power company. You better believe if the lights go out at a cell tower, nobody can do it better than we can to get it back on, right? But we're still investing in the infrastructure to create that highly reliable network because it's such a critical access for all of you in the places that you live. That's what you want out of your power company in order to have water, in order to have wireless service. So for us, I can't emphasize that enough. It's not only the human side, it's also making sure that you have a cyber secure, reliable network, which is a little different emphasis.
In fact, if I could kind of add on to that, I'm security for us is job one, and I think in general, I don't think, people say, well, it's not as important. To me, somebody's going to get hacked in the IoT space if people continue to roll out things that aren't as secure as what we're talking about here. So I think that security should be job one, no matter what you're connecting to the Internet of Things. The other thing I think that's kind of unique in the space we're talking about here is, so we have about almost 25 million IoT devices running on our networks worldwide. And we have SLAs that guarantee like a 99.9% uptime and availability. So we have service level agreements. It's not just best effort. This is critical infrastructure. I will be able to get to it during rain and storms and what have you. So I think that as we start to think about not only talking to these devices, but levels of reliability and backup that are required, and it's going to require multiple different technologies to be able to really provide this full service that we're talking about. It's not just, hey, I can talk to it once in a while.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, we've been doing a lot of work in the water space as well, and any topography or deployment, you're in the bottom of a well. You have to do something very differently than you do when it's attached to a truck. So you have to look at it as a full solution perspective. But in California and San Diego, where I live, we get our water from Colorado. So if we were to put in a system that didn't actually connect and work with the Colorado network, then we actually wouldn't get the benefit. And that only comes when you have the standardization and the interoperability and the understanding and the collaboration across those entities, even though they may not have any incentive to do so. So I think that's super important, because and when you think about regional and federal areas and you think about like city infrastructure, wouldn't it be great if you could drive from one part of the state to the next part of the state and use the same payment method? I mean, there's all these different things that we're really challenging the Department of Transportation, the National Institute for Science and Technology to figure out, so that we can get to that point where the experience is secure, upgradable, and interoperable. And if you don't have those things, I don't think you get the benefit that is what everybody's been talking about.
We're at the beginning, we're really at the beginning of the journey, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at the end of the day, while every organization and use case, frankly, has different network needs, right? Your network has to be resilient, redundant, and secure, right? Your solution, while it's not 100% cellular network, right, it's very secure. Right.
And quite a bit of cellular. We have.
And you do, and you have a lot of cellular, right? To Kiva's point, if you're talking about low power, wide area, or Cat-M or something to that effect, right? For those use cases, you've got that. The cellular network now does a really good job making the handoffs, and it's secure and it's scalable. And I think over time, that's where we'll get these multiple different connectivity modes too, so that there is one platform that's secure, that's different types of connectivity based on the use case, right? And have that interoperability that I think we all need.
I think that's what the really important thing is when we talk to our customers, as well as educating them on just exactly what Mike was saying, that you kind of have to look at your overall architecture. And there's no one right answer to this, because there's such a variety in the different use cases. So whether it's a category M solution or whether or not it's something that's going to require a lot more bandwidth, we need to be able to kind of think about things holistically. So it's like a think big model first. Even if you're going to be able to start with something smaller that you could use one technology, you've got to ensure that everything fits into something that is going to be reliable and secure. So, what you guys were talking about before, that is the right to play. And the good news is most of the folks that we're talking to here in this conference, and especially on this panel, that is what we live and breathe: security, protection of data. Most of us are regulated even. We get that, and that's kind of at the basis of everything that comes out of the various technologies that then support the use cases.
Great. Well, I think we have time to take a question or two from the audience. I think maybe we have a mic that can go around. So just raise your hand high if you've got a question. We'll bring the mic to you. Any questions out there?
You guys don't have to be shy.
There's one over there.
Okay, finally.
After the Great Recession, there was a lot of money dumped into smart meters. This question is probably to Mike. What would you do differently in terms of making, if you could make a new meter today, what would you do different that actually would work on an intelligent network versus all these fractional networks or proprietary networks?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's nice. Certainly the economy building efforts put a lot of money into smart infrastructure and smart grid. I don't think people really understand the benefits of what's happened since that's been rolled out. I mean, people like FPL and ComEd in Chicago can point to uptime and how quickly things are restored after hurricanes or tornadoes or storms or what have you, and the ability to turn customers, turn electricity on and off instantly. And FPL, one of our big partner customers, they're able to, based on the big data again coming off of their network, can actually tell whether there's about to be a fire someplace. So you go down and visit them. They have this really cool data center where they have this chunk of cable that was burned, and they pulled it off the side of a church as it was smoking as they pulled up, realizing there was a problem before the fire happened. So, it's funny when people say, smart meter, everybody says, well, you don't have to send trucks around, right? But it's so much more than that. And the benefits of it, I don't think have been really fully explained. What I will say is, I joined Silver Spring a year ago, and one of the reasons I went there is because the technology is a wide area IPv6, very secure solution. It's not a meter network. I think the people that rolled out meter networks back in 08 and 09 are pretty sorry they rolled that out, which is why my message to people is you got to future-proof your stuff. You can't roll out a network that does one thing, or it's hey, it's fast enough today. Because tomorrow comes pretty quickly and you don't know what your requirements are ahead of time. So I think that the deployments that happened had phenomenal benefit for both customers and the environment, frankly. But I think we're starting to see certainly companies coming back saying, we love the benefits, but we kind of bought the wrong technology. Could you talk to us about what you told us 5 years ago has come true? So it's an interesting time.
We need LTE under the glass. The next evolution of metering technology. You need LTE-enabled telecom mods in the meter under the glass. I don't think it exists unless you know something I don't know today.
We use something better.
Well, I know you do. I know you do.
And then we use LTE in the back end to get the data out.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Over here? Just a moment. We'll bring the mic for you. Thanks.
Here we go.
Great.
Thanks. This question is for Mike. So you just talked about future-proofing the network for utility smart grid applications. So what happens when all that unlicensed 900 megahertz spectrum gets cluttered up?
I'll be honest with you, I've been hearing that for a long time. There's a lot you can do with noise immunity and various things, and there are rules around what you can actually do in the unlicensed spectrum. People always ask us all the time, there seems to be a group of people that are trying to pit us against cellular, and we use cellular extensively. I mean, from my perspective, if you're doing critical infrastructure, what you need going forward is something that has the built-in reliability that a mesh provides. I think having multiple different fallbacks just in case one goes down is sort of a requirement. Whether that technology ends up being some sort of meshed version of LTE at some point in the future, from my perspective, we're Silver Spring Networks. We're not Silver Spring Unlicensed Spectrum Networks. We think we have done the best version of unlicensed spectrum technology that's out there, and it's fully standardized and it's documented. And I guarantee you, we have no issues with noise immunity right now. I think there's room for both people, or for many people to play in this space. I'm not really all that worried about that at this point. There are advantages to both, but like I said, we play both sides of the fence, so for us, it's all goodness.
One of the things that we're actually doing is, we've actually taken spectrum, right, and we're licensing spectrum to utilities, so it'll be private LTE spectrum with Nokia hardware associated with that, and 15 of the top 35 utilities in the U.S. Are interested in that offering. So, while it's not unlicensed, right, there are alternatives out there, for utility providers.
Great. So we just have a few minutes left. I'd love to hear each of you briefly address What do you think the future of smart cities is from your company's perspective? Why is this a key growth area? Why are you engaging with this sector?
I think it goes back, and maybe it was Glenn this morning, was talking about creative destruction. And most people think of gas and electric utilities as pretty boring places to be, right? There's lots of disruptors out there. So our theory is at Southern is we're going to disrupt ourselves. And that's really the smart cities play. How we do that in collaboration with the communities we serve. And it's something unique in our world that we live, we work, we play, and we serve in the same place. So collaboration with our county and city governments has gone on in the utility space for 100 years. We're allowed franchises to operate in those areas. So that collaboration platform already exists. And within the Southern Company footprint, we're very cognizant and aware of it's really, you've got to have the literal government communities as well as the utility as well as the telecom and all the partners to help the vision be implemented. You can't do it without any one piece of that. And it's, I think we said it's multiple solutions. It's no one play that's going to get us there. We just want a seat at the table to continue to serve the customers that we've served for the last 100 years.
Great.
Cool.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great. So, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I think smart cities, the whole thing is really about making life for people who live in them better. And, you know, we're technology people. We talk about bits and bytes and carriers and frequency and this and that. But at the end of the day, the best technology is invisible. So, you know, the interesting thing is how do we put together solutions that are rock solid reliable that, I mean, the communications piece is great, but it's, you know, it's the layers on top of that too that matter. How do we put together in ways that these cities don't have to become experts at big data and experts at everything that we know how to do? How do we put together full solutions that allow them to roll stuff out in a cost-effective way, because after all, it's our taxpayer dollars, to really fundamentally help the lives of the citizens. So it's not about hawking a particular technology, it's about really collaborating on a cost-effective solution that kind of just works. And that's, you know, the best technology is magic like that, right? It just works. You don't have to hire 1,000 consultants and a bunch of people to go in and wire it together and hook it together. You know, it's about how do we make this easy for people to adopt so they see the benefit quickly, and that's what's really exciting to me.
Great, great.
You know, depending on what you read, $1.5 trillion industry, right? Regardless of what device it is, it needs to be connected securely. We've been serving cities for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, right, as a technology provider to them and trusted partner. We understand the citizenry, right, where we have external affairs organizations in these markets and really understand the neighborhoods and the cities and what they need. You know, so I think that, you know, the telcos are in a really unique position to not only provide the different scalable, secure network options that we talked about today, but also move up the stack and participate in other parts of the value chain. And so, you know, that's a really unique opportunity for companies like ourselves and Qualcomm and Verizon that are normally seen in one part of that ecosystem, but we really have the opportunity to move up the stack and provide services that are layered on top of the network that allow us to add more value to the citizens, to the cities, and then participate in more of the value chain for our shareholders.
Great, thanks.
Regardless of really what name you give it, whether it's industrial IoT or internet or industrial 4.0 or smart cities, the reality is we all need gas, water, and electricity, and we all drive on roads, and we all, not all of us drive in a car, but we all have to get it from point A to point B. And at the cornerstone of that is really innovation, and how do we inspire people who've done the same thing, the exact same way, maybe for 100 years, to do it a little bit differently. And I think that's the biggest role we like to play, is really helping them think, don't just replace like for like, replace like with better. And better has some obligations and some implications to it. And ideally, that means that it's intelligent enough on the edge to help you provide a better service and to help you run a better city. So all the progress we've seen to date and the problems we're trying to solve, I would say, you know, there's the technology is an underlying foundation element, but it's not the answer. The answer is transformation in the way people do things and leaders that are willing to make a bet and maybe do it a little bit differently. So.
Great.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for us. How about a nice round of applause for Stuart Cohen?
I guess.
Sorry, we ran out of time. We got to get ready for the next one. Make sure you grab everything on your way out. Nice round of applause for the panel as well. Thank you.